wrap up our year of morning shows. We've had lots of great guests in here, and the last day of the year, no exception. Ken Thied is in as we talk about Triviathon and its history. It's coming up tonight, the big program on WRCO. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning, Phil. So excited for it tonight.
Absolutely. We go back, we were reminiscing before we went on the air, 1988.
It was. It was a project of the Richland Center High School Student Council. I still remember the very first year. Of course, you got to remember, Apple IIe's was the only real resource we had back then for computers. And literally, we kept on a spreadsheet, handwritten, and it was a poster board. And that's how we kept score. We didn't have the aid of computers. And Ron Donahoe's son, Kelly, who is now out in Seattle, was into computers. And he said, I can write a program for that. And we used that the first 2 years, and then a young man by the name of John Basarich, his dad was a dentist here in town, upgraded it, and then really a lot of credit to David Turk, who we were using two Apple IIe's, and we were cross-referencing. Well, David simplified things and really made it usable here at the radio station.
I remember one time when it crashed a little bit. When that's one of the great behind-the-scenes stories. But you always had manual tabulators.
Yes, sir, we did.
And you had students that were like, oh, why do we have to do this? Well, all of a sudden that night, they got thrown into action.
There was some anal retention at that point because nobody thought it would be important. And the two people, I have to give them credit, it was Kerry Keller and Ryan Keller, were at the table. And I want to say, what was it, about 2 hours in, and the computer crashed. Yes. You remember this.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, okay, you guys are on for the next hour. And it was like their eyes went wide open, and there was the old crap syndrome, and they literally was just into it, and to their credit, kept up. We had over 50 teams, and if you can imagine two people keeping track of 50 teams in a 10-minute span, that was very demanding manually to do that. And so whether they remember it or not, and I hope they're listening, if they are, they should have some memories of that.
Indeed. Well, and then they did catch up, and Dave did get it figured out, and
Yep.
I think it was just maybe an apostrophe or something like that.
Whatever it was, it was a glitch in the program.
It was a glitch.
But I do recall how frantically we actually had two students, one handing him the sheets and the other one classifying the sheets, and Dave was just rapping away, probably faster than Adam Hess on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
And he was sweating. I remember Dave was sweating, so that was part of the humor behind the scenes. That's where we get to enjoy Triviathon is what happens here at the radio station. I always wanted to be sitting at home and wondering what was going on in some of these living rooms that were playing or participating, and really you can have a nice family or a group of friends over, a good experience.
That's what people are doing tonight, I hope.
I hope so too.
I remember some of the first questions too, and it wasn't on New Year's Eve. It was a student council related thing. We did it during the week between Christmas and New Year's, but they were literally writing the questions in the back studio from Time Magazine or Newsweek or whatever it was, and handing it to me to ask.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it was written as we go on the fly. And the other thing about that, the questions had a variety of different categories, and then, of course, the caller could pick the next category.
Yes.
And there was a control to getting that first call through, not indifferent to now when you have your trivia here on the radio, to get through on the phone lines was a challenge. I don't think we ever fried the phone lines, but I do know that they did have some concern. And we had 3 lines coming in because you had the weather line and you had the 4155. But the idea of just enough phone jacks. I do remember the old studio and Ron having laid out like 27,000 cords across the floor. How he kept track of those, Ron, if you're listening, I don't know. I thought it was amazing. And having everything set up to come in on this number, it was all ready to go. Wait for the light to come on.
Got it down to a science, I think, after
he was,
a while.
Oh, yeah, it was almost routine.
But another memory I have of the old days was we used up all of our phone lines. Bill Twining was trying to call in from Bi-State Wrestling to do reports because that was on the same day. And then we had the trouble line. We converted that from the Jones Chevrolet weather line.
That's right.
So you had to call that. So, and we had Brian Kennedy manning that. And when somebody would call, he'd be like, do you want the weather or do you want... And if they did, he'd read them the weather.
Well, I've got to go there too. There was 2 calls. One of them I remember well where they called in an obituary.
Oh, sure.
And one of the students answered and said, "What do I do?" I said, "Let's transfer that one to Phil or Ron." And they wanted to do an obituary for the next week, respectfully. And then I do remember, and for those of you, I'm giving it up here on Phil, he did have a cot at the station, and it was in the back room where all the control panels were. And I remember going back there and Brian Kennedy saying, "I don't know what to say to this person," because it was, it was one of those calls where, how do I handle this? And so God bless Brian Kennedy on that one.
And his team, Hairball, has been a long time player, and I see they're registered.
See, that's for those out there, you can have so much fun with just the naming of your team. And of course, name appropriate now, but the creativity with the name and the uniqueness of the name. And of course, we've had now we got some second generation names coming in too, don't we?
We do. I know one of them I saw come across was the Next Generation Fairground Friends.
Okay, there you go. And I got to go there. And the minister at the time, I won't give up her name, but they were calling in on a rebuttal of a question. And she said to me, "Ken, I'm a minister. I wouldn't lie to you." I said, I understand what you're saying. And part of it is for us, the way we write the question. I get that completely. But, it's even in today's world. Somebody will Google something. Well, this answer is also right. I said, if you Google it, you could probably get 3 or 4 different answers. And sometimes we even give the source, or we try to make it so you have to go through a couple sources to get there. The questions back then, and you have to appreciate, you mentioned the Time magazine. If you will, also, we had a thematic for It's a Wonderful Life. Mm-hmm. And people were actually stopping it. And just this last year, we had a question about Andy Griffith and how much a haircut was. And if you went to one episode in season 1 of the Andy Griffith Show, all the other shows, you would go to, and it was a set price, but there was a difference. And so with that, and of course, the ability to take a snapshot of that and send it to us, I was amazed at how the technology with AI has really changed the playing and the playing of it. But still, there's the fun and excitement behind what's the next question. Let's get ready for it. And then that time sequence. And we are having at least 1, maybe 2 of the 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, just to do something different. The comparison, you got to understand, when we brought this in 1988, in the early 90s, there was really some refining that took place. And I thought at one point we really had it down to a science where the number of teams playing and went on percentages, which we still do. It became a staple for a really routine program that you knew the rules and you could go through and you could play, but it's to have some fun. It really is to do a nice social event on New Year's Eve. It doesn't have to be anything more than family or friends getting together. I do know there was a person just played by themselves. Mm-hmm. Some people say, I play and I just play along. That's great. I would probably say 90% of your listeners are listening, and they go away and they do something else, or they might go until 10 o'clock. I'm out here to put it to you. Get a team in, play as long as you like. You're going to find that you're going to get almost bitten by the bug, and you're going to play along. And for those veteran teams that are listening, I'm sure you're going to give me a hard time when you call in. But the fact is, when you call in, we here now at the station, there'll be 4 of us answering. And you two, Bo, and you will be taking care of how it's changed from, we would have 15 to 20 kids working it. And again, everybody had a job, and it was an important role, and it was providing a good community service.
It was. Lots of fun, lots of history. A member of a longtime team, in fact, quite the dream team they used to have. Chris Simonson is here. He'll be working tonight as well. But you've been on both sides of it. You've been listening to the radio, and you've been on this side taking the calls over the years.
I have been. Lance Ottman and I, along with my wife Heather, began playing the second year. Heather and I had just gotten back from our honeymoon, and we heard about this and thought, well, yeah, this is kind of fun. And Lance was able to come over. Stacy wasn't able to come. I think she was home with the kids. So Lance and I and Heather played before Heather had to take off and go to work. And we really enjoyed it. And that's how we got bit by the bug. And the next year, we became the Opposable Thumbs with the Ottmans, ourselves, Jim and Norleen Agard, Dave, Tim, and Paul and Louise Murphy. Basically, that was our core group for a number of years. And of course, in those days, pre-internet, we would bring in all the resources we thought that would help us. We would check out the World Book from the library at school. We would grab the entire year's worth of People magazine and U.S. News and World Report and Time and all of those things. You know, the newspapers from the last few weeks for those things. And we loved digging in. You'd get your question and away you go. Oh, I think I saw that and we'd start tearing into things. And of course, you had to wait before you called in until you had the answer, because if you called in and gave your team name and your team number, what's your answer? If you don't have an answer, then that was your one shot. So it was a different world for those of you who don't know what it is not to be walking around with a computer in your pocket, and you're just trying to come up with as much stuff as you can as quickly as you can, especially during the speed round.
The speed round was awesome. And
those were great.
We brought that in, not unlike what was up at Stevens Point. Again, you got to understand, theirs is 60 hours. We did 6 hours. And the speed round now, you're having what would be an hour's worth of question in about 20 minutes, and controlled by your bell and moving on and moving on. What amazed me was the teams that could run the table. You know,
right.
Get all 6 questions, because they were not easy. There were some in there, but for those that don't know what the speed round was, it was everything doubled. So you started out 10 went to 20, 20 went to 40, 40 went to 80, 80 went 60. You could get 320 points in the speed round.
Right.
And that could take you from 7th to 2nd in a matter of minutes, and you miss that one question, and you only go 5 out of 6, and that's only 160 points.
Right.
And that was the thing about the increment, and it really kept the listeners active and the teams active, although I'm sure it created some stress and anxiety. Just that speed round and how quickly you'd go through that, because there's usually a couple songs in between, and a lot of credit to you, Phil. You always tie in a song that's, shall we say, appropriate to the question. And I think you have fun doing that with your music side.
Really do.
You do, yeah. And some of the questions, the one that comes back to mind, it was early on, and the teachers were writing the questions originally. And he just passed away, so I need to humbly say, Tom Trapon. And his question was the PSI of a tire. And people actually went out to their car with a flashlight and were shining a flashlight on the tire. And the correct answer was 32 PSI. But of course, that's debatable. And even in today's world, depending on what type of tires you have and size of tires, there is no generic answer for that. But the idea that they would actually go out into their driveway and take a look at their car tire, it says 36 on here, and the enthusiasm behind that was even more entertaining.
Indeed. Chris, as a player with the Opposable Thumbs,
right.
Do you remember any favorite questions?
Favorites, no. Frustrating ones, yes. Those are the ones that stick in your craw. Again, talking about the speed round, there was a question during the speed round one year where it asked for some information off the bronze plaque at the post office here in Richland Center. And playing in our living room in Blue River and having one song to come up with an answer, we just stared at one another and said, seriously? And we had a good idea of the teams that were close enough that could drive there, call, so those we remember. We remember Ron had one year, I think it was the $10 bill that has the U.S. Treasury building on the back of it. And the question was, what is the make of the automobile in front of that? And the answer they gave was the Hupmobile, of course. Well, first of all, the United States government would never have put an actual automobile on currency because that would be showing favoritism toward one manufacturer over another. And that was one of those things where we were just incensed. But, Ron had a source. It's like,
I see it still gets you after all these years.
Yeah, I will hang on to things and not let them go.
And I wanted to mention, too, the post office one, though. Now, you could go to Google Maps and you'd probably find it. It's such a different world.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, you go to Google Street View and just zoom in and, here's what it is.
There it is.
That's how it's changed over the course of time.
Yes, very much.
And really, what we had, this is early on, where teams had a tape recorder sitting there and would tape record the question because you'd read it twice and go to a song. Well, if you missed a word or missed something to clarify, and we'd have teams that would play, if you remember, they would play back. Well, this is what you said, and they would click on the primitive, I'm sure it was an old cassette tape, tape recorder that you taped that question. That's part of people need to recognize that there is some real history that dates back now over 3 decades ago. And to say the frustrating questions, I always ask, with trivia, what was your favorite? What was the most frustrating? The frustrating one is where you knew the answer and you couldn't get through, or worse yet, after you called through, you actually found the correct answer and you'd given the wrong answer when you called in. And that, again, is part of the fun. It's the fun of playing. It's part of the whole trivia story,
Yeah, you're right. There were a number of times where our team would come up with, half of us think it's this and half of it's, or Paul Murphy would say, no, I'm pretty sure it's that. And we would overrule him and come to find out, Paul was right. and more often that happened, once or twice every year, it seemed like. But,
Hopefully this still happens, but, the chance to phone a friend,
yes.
I think that was always fun. And I remember, some stalwarts in the community, that got a lot of phone calls. Marge Wallace was one. My Uncle Frank Stafford was one. He would get calls. I think you guys might have called him from time to time.
Yep, we did.
And I recall a question that we were asking about old school mascots. And one of them was the mascot for Spring Green High School, which was, I believe, the Shamrocks.
The Shamrock, yep.
But Ted Lenz in Spring Green told me that he got like 30 calls that night.
Yep. Yeah, I remember calling Logie Swinehart for something one year, and I don't remember if it was for Avoca or whether it was for Highland, because we knew that Avoca had played Highland. So, odd.
And all this trivia comes back to part of the enjoyment of the evening. And if you're able to participate, that's really, truly the joy. And the fact is, you're in your own living room. A couple teams would actually play together, but you have to be cautious because you hit it on the head, Chris. You can only call in once. If you call in second time, it voids both of them. And so the idea being a second call will do you in. And I do know where 2 or 3 people have their phones going to see who can get through first. And that's part of the technology with the phone side of it, where you go to the redial. Well, that's changing the whole landscape of everything. But that's part of the history.
Lots of favorites over the years. That's true. And so we've gone to, I guess there are quite a few with a little bit of a local slant, and not all of them. I mean, and I would say there are some softball lobs in there too that you can find fast, but you need some of those too.
You don't want to miss those. Those, that's the key. And then the comeback is realize if it's a softball lob and 95% of the people are getting it, it's only going to be a 10-pointer. So if you do miss it, that isn't where the opposite, if you're 1 or 2 of the people that get that one question right, that changes the whole landscape of everything too.
Lots of fun and lots of landmark questions. I remember the one of my favorites is the name that's painted on the tank at Cazenovia by the American Legion. And now you can probably find that one pretty easy. And I think somebody did Google that, but found it. But it is Rosebud 2, I think is what it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Early on, and if I mention it, you're going to know right away, Phil. And it was actually about James Bond. And Ian Fleming's James Bond. And, of course, there's parodies that are produced. And the one in this case would be David Niven in Casino Royale.
Right.
And when you're talking about how many people played James Bond. Of course, that's part of the trivia. And you had to, we didn't say Ian Fleming's James Bond. We said James Bond. Well, that's where in writing the question, we try to write a question that's not infallible, but you want to have a question that's clear, concise, and something straightforward. I remember the question, and it was very confusing, as you said. Only 2 teams got it right. But the fact was, as it came about, we had to toss the question out because of the source and what was there. Why do I mention that? Because we make mistakes too, but I think part of the fun of it is just participating.
Mm-hmm. You bet. Looking at the time tonight, 6 to midnight. It seems like it's a long time, Chris, but in between questions, sometimes if you're sweating it out, it doesn't seem like it's that long or it's long enough, right?
Yeah, you're right. And it's a different game now than what it was, when you didn't have the internet and all you had were printed resources or phoning a friend or trying to pull something out of your head from that you learned in history class. Oh, the Gadsden Purchase, for example, those kind of things. But now, depending upon how quickly you can find it, then if your person gets through, you're good to go. Oh, I can go get some more snacks for my plate. I can finally go to the bathroom because none of you people have been able to handle this without me. But we've called in. It's a great way to spend the evening, because in between the questions, you're talking, maybe you're playing a game of cards, maybe you're watching the finale of Stranger Things, maybe, whatever else you could be doing. But it is a fantastic way. We looked forward to this every single year. It was just great.
We do. And then the other thing was, again, with the internet, but it used to be a recap of the previous year. But, we'd say, like, who was Time Magazine's Man of the Year?
Yeah.
Now, how fast you could find that answer? Probably you'd already have it.
That's part of that softball lob, too, that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think that's, with the questions themselves, the local flair brings in a lot, but it isn't just Richland Center. It's the surrounding area. And I think even people have asked for Wisconsin history questions or Richland County questions because that's become a more popular category for trivia. And I think as you bring in, because you can go through your math, science, English, history, you can go through the TVs and movies and board games and game shows and everything that would be a part of how silent trivia became part of the high school one and much different and a part of that. This one really presents that social atmosphere that you can go about.
Right.
One of my favorites last year was the question about George Webb, and the question was about his name is mentioned on nearly every Milwaukee Brewer broadcast, and he's born in the area, Richland County or whatever, and a lot of people were guessing Ryan Duran because that would make sense, but it was really hard to find in Google that George Webb, famous for the George Webb hamburgers in Milwaukee, was born in Cazenovia.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, too, for the teams that are going to play tonight or anybody that plays. Call in an answer. We hope it's somewhat legitimate and somewhere not too off base, but sometimes you can actually, in a reasonable guess or narrow it down to 2 choices, that you still call in because the way the scoring goes about, it's the number of teams playing. It isn't the number of teams that call in. So to call in an answer near the end of it, even to get through and give a good guess at the answer, and teams have pulled it out of their hat, so to speak, as you said, Chris, right. That you last minute you get it. Well, get through and call in. If you're playing tonight, that's part of the fun. I know I have a friend who says, well, I just play along and I keep my own score. I said, you're missing out on one thing, and that's the challenge of getting through on the phone lines. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself is part of Triviathon and part of playing and part of participating. So if you say, well, I'm just going to play along at home, okay, great. First of all, thank you for listening. But part of that fun of the Triviathon mystique is getting through on the phone lines, and then in between, go get a snack or use the restroom or whatever it is. But as soon as the next question's coming up, everybody is attentive to the question or who's the expert that we're going to ask for help on this one.
We usually repeat them somewhere about halfway through. By
Right.
that point, a lot of people have answered, but in case, and I think sometimes that's for the people that are playing at home. Like, what was that question? And get a chance to hear what we're working on.
It's much more intimate here at the radio station now with what we have, and what was the old station down, 211 Bowman Drive. And then, of course, we can't forget the flood year, and when we did it in what is now Wallace, Cooper, and Elliott. And that was very compact, but we still had a full program. What we're doing now is, you're looking at really 6 people that are taking care of the whole realm of what's happening here in the station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a little bit different. I forgot that year down at the Wallace, Cooper, and Elliott building.
And a good memory with that, because really resourceful. And made use of space. I remember 2 tables side by side and people on each side of the table working it through. I have to share the one, I mentioned it to you before we went on the air, where the transmitter went down. And what do we do? And Ron says, oh my God. I said, well, I've got a 4-wheel drive. He goes, you do? I said, yeah. So we jumped in my truck and put it in 4-wheel drive up the hill. I mean, it was like up Mount Crumpet.
Yes, it was.
Okay. And if you've never been up there, folks, you can take a look at it. And there's trails there. Miners Trail, I think, is up near that. And Ron, if you're listening, I swear to God, you pulled out a gum wrapper from Wrigley's and wrapped it around the wire, and it connected and called back. And yep, we're up and running. We're going to start up again in 10 minutes. And we came down the hill. I should say slid down the hill, because it was weather that was meant to be inside and play inside. So those little things behind the scenes really make for the entertainment too.
Yeah, that was right at the end of the night too. It was like the last. It may have been during the speed round. But
I
anyway.
think. Well, we extended it. It was like 12:20 when we got
extended
done that
it.
year.
But we try to count down to midnight every year in Auld Lang Syne. Then that's when we wrap it up.
And that's and I heard you say it this morning. You're going to open the station and close the station tonight with maybe a nap in between.
We'll work on that a little later.
Okay.
Good choice. Good choice.
We'll be back with more on the morning show coming up in just a moment.
Every child deserves a fair shot at a bright future. That's why Save the Children Head Start administers Head Start programs in rural America. We leveled the playing field early, helping children start school strong, stay strong, and unlock their full potential. Because education is the best path out of poverty. Learn more at savethechildren.org/Head Start.
Now we're officially back on the morning show. I'm Phil Nee, and glad to have you in as we cap off our 2025 shows with a couple of guys that are just full of trivia knowledge. Ken Theed and Chris Simonson.
Well, we're full of something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, keep it clean.
One caller calling, and this has been the burning question all year after Henry Bray, kind of shortchanged me on the Andy Griffith quiz. But Aunt B's question about kerosene pickles, if that is what she is best known for her recipes.
I think the greater part of America will agree it's apple pie.
Apple pie.
And I think you can go a step further. That show was not about her. It was her favorite recipe for pickles. It wasn't her all-time best. And if you watch the episode, if you remember the neighbor, she wins it. And, of course, that was where Andy and Barney are eating pickles out of their ears and so tired they're hiding them wherever they can. It wasn't about that. I think you can find more episodes of apple pie in it. And the quality of that was her specialty. And I think, as America wants to know, I think 99.9% will agree it is apple pie.
Should have been a fridge hanger. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. The kerosene pickles can go, Yeah.
And I'll put it to you very simply. If you had a choice between one or the other, which one would you want to eat?
Apple pie.
Apple pie.
Sure.
Apple pie.
So that's the factor that settles it. It was an episode. I will I will agree with you, and it was at the fair, and it was competition. But no, her apple pie would be slam dunk. Yeah.
Thank you. I should have had a fridge hanger in that one, but at least we're able to clear it out on the last day of the year.
There we go. There we go.
There is still time to register for Triviathon if you'd like to do that. 608-647-2111. And we can get your information, give you a team number to play with, and you'll be in the running. We've had that. I mentioned this earlier, but we had somebody last year call after 2 questions. Can I register? And, of course, we let them. You know, they were 2 questions behind, but it was all about including them and having
If
fun.
you're making plans now, let's try to do it during the afternoon.
Yeah.
You get in. That way you're comfortable. You got your team name, you got your team number, you got everything settled in, and then there isn't that rush right before. So if you can make that call, before 5 o'clock, that gives even an hour. And then we also set up our scoring based on that too. So if you are a part of that, that's important for the tabulation side of it.
Chris, you'll be answering the phones tonight. And
I will.
Again, that's something that you didn't do before, but this is I guess something you enjoy, right?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah, I like to hear the answers. I like to hear the team names. After a while, I recognize the voices of people calling in. Oh, this is Sarah Pleckelman that I'm talking to tonight. So yeah, no, that's fun. I just hope that I get things in the right order, because there were times when I would ask for the team name before I would ask for the team number, and I think we ask for the number first, right?
It's a combination of 3. You'll do the team number, team name,
and
then
your answer. Yep, that's it. Those 3 questions. 3, sir.
Yeah,
those 3 questions.
And that's a part of it too. That call in and it all takes place. It becomes routine, but it's not mundane. Yeah.
Right.
And the other thing I will say is make sure, if you're calling on a cell phone, make sure you got good connection. Maybe if you have to stand on 1 foot by the bay window or something. But that's
right.
Another problem sometimes, where somebody calls and they get cut off before they can give the answer, Chris.
Yep. Right. Yep.
We've had it happen. We've had it happen. I come back to the simple line, and I heard you mentioning it with Henry this morning. It's for fun. There's no prize other than pride.
Right.
The recap always I enjoy the next day, and you do bring back even for the highlights through the weekend. Just the reading off of the team names and the whole idea of the participation from that evening. The only thing that can top that is Bill Twining's report from Bi-State, I think.
Well, he got that in this morning, so we don't
did
have
a good
to,
job. Yeah.
So we're good. Yep.
We don't have to try to fit him in. I wanted to salute ID 10Ts. They were the first team to register this year.
And there's a little history there. So for those people that don't know, if you're a novice at best, you need to write that out to figure out really how they came up with the team name. And we deemed that appropriate, and we're looking for appropriate team names. And I guess I would ask, how did you come up with your team name with the crew that you had?
Opposable Thumbs?
Yeah.
I don't remember. It was some reference that was in a TV show at some point or something like that, and where the character said, well, yeah, of course we're better because we have opposable thumbs. And that's where it came from.
The fairgrounds friends, the freight warriors are fondly remember. Crew of the Enterprise.
Burl Ives,
yes. And again, you can go version 1, version 2, version Burl Ives relived, you can come back with that. And like you said, we have those team names. So the team name, have some fun with it. Yeah, that's a good part of it.
There was a tribute to James Garner's garage, too, I think.
There was more to that, but we deemed it appropriate to keep it in James Garner's garage.
We shortened it up.
We did. And so for those of you, you'll never know. We'll keep it here. That'll be one of our secrets that we'll keep posted. But again, so keep it user-friendly and PG at best, all right?
Yeah.
Lonesome Me.
I remember that one, yeah.
Oh, yeah. There are a couple of years where Lonesome Me, obviously just one player. But again, having fun doing it by themselves.
Triviathon is a community service. It really is. And again, the music that goes along with it, the questions, the script, as we have it, that's from the inner workings of the station here, just setting up the script. And thank you, Phil, for doing that. You take in a lot of different sources and a lot of information, but I think you have fun doing that, don't you? Getting the script ready?
Absolutely do.
Yeah, and the sequence of the questions, there's no rhyme or reason to it. I think that's a big part of it. It's random. It's truly random.
And of course, it was your vision to bring it here because you played in Stevens Point.
It was and it modified significantly. And I will say this: we actually went up to observe. And if you haven't been to something of this magnitude. There were over 20 phone lines. They were bringing in pizzas, not by the box, but they would bring them in by the stack for the workers that were there. We had an actual crew that went up to UW-Stevens Point, and a shout out to Darren Gunderson, because I believe he rode with us, because I believe he had a wrestling tournament up there or something to that regard, and traveled with us to Stevens Point to observe. So for the students, that was a little bit of a privilege. I know it's not indifferent to with the plays or with music. The Eau Claire Jazz Fest is the one I think of that Randy always did.
Right.
The idea of there's a certain background reward. UW Stevens Point was internationally known. Thousands of teams. I have to I continue to give this, but it was my senior year in college, and I'm asleep. I'm sleeping on the couch. Here's your question. We all remember the movie The Shining, and we remember Jack Nicholson, and as he comes through the door with a baseball bat saying, "Here's Johnny." The question was, what was the name of the player on the bat?
Excellent question.
That is a good question.
Great question. And the reason I recall that, because people had developed with their Apple IIes, the Burroughs 2900 would fill a whole 10 by 20 classroom, the computer at that time. People had developed their files and they had their booklets. And I'm going to say it. If you still have some resource booklets sitting around, wouldn't hurt to have them handy. Just a simple blue book, or if you got a few magazines from the last year, even a couple observers might help out on a question or two. That idea of saying, "Oh, I think it is," or you have a way of, because Google is there. But you got to realize there's some softball lobs, but there's a couple questions you'd have to agree, Phil. You've set up that cannot be Googled.
And you have to find maybe the first answer to get the answer we're looking for as well.
That's even better.
It is.
A trail leading to. We had a few of those last year. There was one on Merrill Brunson and his shooting percentage when he played over in England. Well, that in and of itself is trivial. And, of course, we have a local personality that's a part of that. I enjoyed that question.
What was the answer to the baseball bat question, by the way? Do you remember?
Oh, boy. I honestly, now, so for trivia tonight, we will have ready the answer for The Shining. And you can narrow it down to a certain degree of, there's probably about a half dozen names, from Hank Aaron to Willie Mays to Johnny Bench, the common wood baseball bats back in that era. Mm-hmm. And I see Chris Simonson getting ready to Google that right now.
Looking it up.
Yeah, he might be doing that.
And now if you can't Google it, again, you can probably go right to that point in the movie and
that's what people
zoom it in.
That was, again, I got to throw out a memory. It's a Wonderful Life. And all the things that took place in that. Now I would think there's two classics that my daughters have all the lines memorized to. Christmas Vacation. Tell me you don't have that as a part or a staple for your holiday season. And The Grinch. Now, is it the original Grinch or is it the one with Jim Carrey? But those are movies that are regularly watched. A Christmas Story I'm not as big a fan of, but that can also be a part of your holiday season, if you will. We've had just lyrics from songs, and sometimes you come back to that trivia stone. Yeah, we don't ask that you recklessly drive to a location, but it may be a location in Richland County that you have to know.
Last year we had the question about the number that is on the train car at the depot here.
I was surprised at the number of people that
it was like an easy question.
Flawlessly got through.
That's a case in point too, where we think like, okay, this one, very few teams are going to get, and then they ace it. It's hard for us to judge.
Mr. Efficiency, and I really appreciate him, which I've told him that because he's the question master. But you now have an answer, do you not?
We have an answer. The baseball bat Wendy uses in The Shining has the name of Boston Red Sox legend Carl Yastrzemski.
Oh.
As a nod to Stephen King's love for the Boston Red Sox.
Great trivia.
That
Great
is
Carl
good
Yastrzemski.
stuff.
But realize in 1981, that was not an easy answer.
No.
Not at all.
Couldn't Google it?
That was not. Well, you literally had to have the movie, and you'd have to fast forward your VHS tape to get there.
And there's lines across the screen when you pause the VHS tape.
Yeah, that's it. I remember the year that you did the It's a Wonderful Life thing. We had our VHS of It's a Wonderful Life, and we threw it in, and it's like, okay, got it. No, back. There it is.
And that was part of the fun. Again,
yes.
But that was the technology of the era. Mm-hmm. That was the technology of the era.
Yep.
I told that story the last time I was here, but somebody told me that in the early days when they first had a computer, they would look it up. It was all dial-up. And then when they'd find the answer, they have to unplug the computer, plug their phone in, and then dial their phone.
Yep, absolutely, yes.
Their landline.
It was amazing the computer files that you'd create on those floppy disks, you know.
Oh, right. What's your favorite type of trivia question, Chris? Do you have one?
I usually entertainment of some sort, whether it's music or movies or television. Those are the ones that I tend to go toward, I would say.
When you played Trivial Pursuit back in the day, you were probably like me. You got the little piece of pie, and then you struggle with geography and some of the other ones.
Geography. Why geography? Yes. One of my first tournaments, I taught a year in Owatonna, Minnesota before I came back home, and they had a Trivial Pursuit tournament there. I was on a team. We ultimately ended up finishing second, but the members of my team each took a category and memorized the answers on all the cards.
My goodness.
We took the time to do that, and for the finals, they dug out the newest set, the maroon-colored set of Trivial Pursuit, and it's like, here we go. So, but yeah, that was my first foray into real trivia contests.
I think it's having that specialist. You know, you'd think for me a favorite question would either be sports or history related. It's not. It's pop culture. The decade of the 90s, for example. And it's interesting from youth to it's intergenerational. The idea that you have somebody that would, I remember that. Well, that happened in 1974. You know, and to remember that, obviously, the last two decades, the 2000s, a lot of the younger people would play, but and some of the older people may not recognize the answer, even though it's relatively new. That intergenerational, whether it be movies or television or Beanie Babies or American Doll or whatever it might be.
No doubt.
Right, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I remember as we went on through the years, we would drag Lyric along with us, and the Ottmans would bring Jamie and Jennifer, and Jim and Norleen would bring Emerson along. So you'd get those one or two questions about, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something like that, and it's, hey, who is... Really? And they'd give us the answer.
They had the answer, no flaw, but you had no clue,
No, we'd have no idea.
Donatello or whatever.
Sure. Let's
Raphael.
Let's go with Donatello. Why not?
Yeah, it does pay to have somebody of all ages, maybe.
Yes.
And of all expertises.
Absolutely. You want it's like a really good cabinet for a leader. You want the best in everything.
Or somebody you can call or text real quickly.
Right.
Number that we'll use all night is going to be 647-2111, and they can call and register on that one as well. Is that correct?
That is correct. And also you can text us if you have an issue or whatever the case might be. And that text number is 608-647-4155 or through the Civic Media.
I remember that classic number, too. So
there you go.
The two classic numbers for W. But you said for any rebuttals or questions, go through the 4155 number.
Yeah.
Texting it.
To text it, and then we can get back to you. Great. Well, thanks for coming in, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
We'll see you tonight.
Looking forward to it.
Chris Simonson and Ken Thie, they'll be behind the scenes tonight. We want to pay tribute to our sponsors of this year's Triviathon, Cardinal Glass CG, Rockwell Automation, Harris Professional Painting, Jones Chevrolet, Walsh's Ace, Napa Auto and Truck Parts, TKO Barbecue, Pratt Funeral and Cremation Service, Sunshine and Giggles, Creative Outlet, Larson Collision and Paint, Computer Doctors, Kickapoo Creekside, Kickapoo Quick Stop, Galaxy Skate Center, Christie's Sunnyside Bakery and Cafe, and Benson Insurance. The fun begins tonight at 6 o'clock right here on WRCO.